This is the complete roll call of Soviet steel in World War II, from desperate pre-war prototypes to battlefield legends that broke the Wehrmacht. We're covering all 50 tanks the Red Army put to war. Names, silhouettes, firepower, and the stories behind them: fast, brutal, unforgettable. Starting with the T-18 MS-1, born in 1927 as the USSR's first mass-produced tank. Roughly 960 were built for training and border defense. By 1941 it was hopelessly outdated, yet some survivors were dug in as fixed bunkers during the desperate early battles of Barbarossa. The T-27. This tiny tankette entered service in 1931, with more than 3,000 produced for scouting and infantry support. Armed only with a machine gun and thin armor, it was obsolete by 1941. Many were relegated to security duties or used as improvised strongpoints. The T-26. Introduced in 1931 and based on the Vickers 6-ton, it became the Red Army's workhorse with over 10,000 built. Its 45mm gun was dangerous early on, but its armor was thin and riveted. In 1941, losses were catastrophic under German air and anti-tank fire. The OT-26, this flamethrower version of the T-26, replaced the main gun with a flame projector to clear trenches and bunkers. Fielded in the late 1930s, it saw combat in the Winter War and early World War II. Terrifying up close, it was vulnerable at range like any light tank. The OT-130. Built on the T-26 chassis, this specialized flamethrower tank was designed for assault work against fortifications. It appeared in the late 1930s and fought in the Winter War and the opening months of 1941. Its flame weapon shocked defenders, but limited protection kept casualties high. The OT-133. Another T-26-based flamethrower variant, it was intended to burn out infantry positions and strongpoints during breakthroughs. Produced in small numbers around 1940, it entered the chaos of 1941 largely unprepared for modern anti-tank guns. Like its siblings, it was deadly only at very short range. The BT-2. Debuting in 1932, this fast Bystrakordny tank used Christie suspension to reach around 70 kilometers on roads. Armed with a 37mm gun, it embodied Soviet deep battle ideas: speed over armor. By 1941, its thin protection made those daring charges brutally costly. The BT-5. Introduced in 1933, it upgraded the BT line with a powerful 45mm gun and retained extreme mobility. BT-5s fought in Spain, at Kalhin Gol, and then in the opening clashes with Germany. Fast and hard-hitting, they still burned easily when hit. The BT-7. Entering service in 1935, it refined the high-speed BT concept with improved reliability and the 45mm gun. It was one of the most common Soviet cavalry tanks in 1941. On the move it was formidable, but thin armor and fuel fires turned many retreats into wreck fields. The BT-7M. This late BT variant arrived in 1939 with the V2 diesel engine, improving range and reducing fire risk. It was the peak of the fast tank era, just as war proved armor mattered more. Many BT-7Ms fought in 1941, often outgunned but never outpaced. The BT-7A. An artillery support version of the BT-7, it mounted a 76mm gun for blasting infantry and field positions. Produced in limited numbers in the late 1930s, it offered heavier firepower without heavier armor. In early World War II, it was useful in support if it survived long enough to shoot. The T-28. This multi-turret medium tank entered service in 1933 with a 76mm main gun and a crew of 6. Around 500 were built, and it fought in the Winter War, where extra armor was added after heavy losses. In 1941, its size and complexity made it hard to keep running. The T-35. The Red Army's 5-turret heavy tank, built from 1933 to 1939 in only about 61 examples. It looked unstoppable on parade, carrying multiple guns and machine guns. In real combat during 1941, mechanical failures and air attack destroyed many before they ever reached the front line. The T-37A, introduced in 1933, this small amphibious tank was built for reconnaissance and river crossings, with over 1,000 produced. It carried only a machine gun and minimal armor. When World War II arrived, many were used as improvised infantry support, where their light build dangerously fragile. The T-38, a 1936 redesign of the T-37A, it kept amphibious capability while improving stability and layout. Still armed with a machine gun, it served as a scout and liaison tank in huge pre-war formations. In 1941, many were thrown into desperate ground fighting they were never meant to face, the T-40. Entering service in 1940, it was the USSR's last true amphibious scout tank, better protected than earlier floaters. Only a few hundred were built before wartime realities shifted production to simpler designs. In 1941 it scouted, screened retreats, and often fought like a mini-tank destroyer, at great risk, the SMK. A prototype heavy tank tested in the Winter War of 1939, built as a multi-turret breakthrough machine. In combat it struck a mine and was abandoned under fire, a dramatic end that exposed the flaws of oversized designs. Its trials helped push the Soviets toward the single-turret KV concept. T-100. Another Winter War prototype, this two-turret heavy tank was created to smash fortifications alongside the SMK. It proved cumbersome and vulnerable to mines and artillery despite its size. The experience convinced Soviet designers that simpler, heavily armored single-turret tanks were the future, paving the way for the KV series, the KV-1. Introduced in 1939, this heavy tank shocked German crews in 1941 with armor that early anti-tank guns struggled to penetrate. Armed with a 76mm gun, it served as a breakthrough tank and mobile fortress. Over 3,000 were built, but weight and mechanical strain often limited its battlefield impact. The KV-2. Fielded in 1940, it mounted a massive 152mm howitzer in a towering turret meant to demolish bunkers. Around 200 were produced, and in 1941 it could shatter anything it hit if it hit first. Slow, top-heavy, and mechanically stressed, many were lost to breakdowns or flank shots. KV-1S. Rushed into service in 1942, this speedy KV cut weight to regain mobility while keeping thick armor for breakthrough battles. Its 76mm gun was still effective early on, but German long guns soon caught up. About 1,100 were built before newer heavy tanks replaced it. The KV-8. Entering combat in 1942, this KV-1 variant swapped its main gun for a flamethrower to burn out bunkers and trenches. A small 45mm gun remained for self-defense, but the real weapon was terror and fire. Only around 100 were produced, making it rare. The KV-8S. Built in 1942-43 on the lighter KV-1S chassis, it paired improved mobility with a whole flamethrower for close-range assault. It was designed for city fighting and fortified lines where standard guns struggled. Production stayed limited, roughly 100 before Soviet heavy tank designs moved on. The KV-85. Introduced in late 1943, it was a stopgap heavy tank mounting the powerful 85mm D5T gun in a new turret. It finally gave KV crews a better answer to Panthers and Tigers, but only briefly. About 130 were built before the IS series took over. The T-50. Accepted in 1941, this advanced light infantry tank featured sloped armor and a 45mm gun in a three-man turret, rare quality for its class. But it was expensive and hard to manufacture during the invasion crisis. Fewer than 70 were built, making it a wartime what-if. The T-30. Fielded in 1941 as an emergency light tank, it was a simplified offshoot of the amphibious T-40 to keep factories producing armor fast. Armed with a 20mm autocannon or machine guns, it was undergunned but useful for reconnaissance and infantry support. Roughly 300 to 350 were made. The T-60. Entering service in late 1941, this tiny light tank was churned out to replace massive early war losses. Its 20mm autocannon could harass infantry and light vehicles, but struggled against armor. Over 5,900 were built, serving as scouts, escorts, and stopgap steel cavalry, the T-70. Introduced in 1942, it upgraded Soviet light forces with a 45mm gun and better armor than the T-60. Still crewed by only two, the commander was overloaded, hurting combat performance. Around AT-200 were produced, and many later chassis became Su-76 self-propelled guns. The T-80, debuting in 1943. This rare light tank tried to fix T-70 problems with a two-man turret and improved observation. It kept the 45mm gun but came too late as Soviet doctrine shifted away from light tanks. Only about 70 to 80 were built before production ended. The T-34 XXX. First deployed in 1940-41, it combined sloped armor, wide tracks, and a 76.2mm gun that excelled in mud and snow. Early models suffered from poor optics and cramped turrets, yet the design's balance was unmatched. Tens of thousands were built, forming the Red Army's backbone. The T-3457, first used in 1941. This rare T-34 mounted a high-velocity 57mm gun optimized for tank killing, able to punch through enemy armor at range. The trade-off was weak, high-explosive power against infantry and fortifications. Produced in small batches, it returned briefly in 1944. The OT-34, introduced in 1942, this flamethrower T-34 replaced the bow machine gun with an ATO flamethrower for brutal close-quarters assaults. It kept the main cannon, making it both a standard tank and a shock weapon. Thousands were converted, especially for cities and fortified positions. The T-34/85. Entering service in 1944, it answered German Panthers with a larger three-man turret and an 85mm gun. Improved crew efficiency and firepower made it far deadlier than earlier T-34s. Built in huge numbers, it carried Soviet armor through Berlin and remained in service for decades. The ES-1. Arriving in late 1943, this heavy tank was designed to replace the KV line, with better armor shaping and mobility. Its 85mm gun was effective, but Soviet commanders wanted more punch against heavy German tanks and fortifications. Only about 100 to 150 were built before the ES-2 superseded it. The ES-2, introduced in 1944, it brought a massive 122mm gun that could smash bunkers and threaten Panthers and Tigers with single hits. Its thick frontal armor made it a true breakthrough tank for assaults. Over 3,300 were built, spearheading Soviet offensives from 1944 to victory. The infantry tank Mk2 Matilda II, sent to the USSR under Lend-Lease from 1941. It arrived with heavy armor that early German guns struggled to penetrate. Its 2-pounder gun lacked high explosive punch, limiting versatility. Matildas fought on the Eastern Front through 1942 as tough, slow infantry support. The infantry tank Mk4 Valentine, delivered in large numbers from 1941 onward, it was reliable, compact, and well-suited to harsh Soviet conditions. Early 2-pounder models were lightly armed, but later Valentines improved with bigger guns. Over 3,000 served with the Red Army, prized for endurance and easy maintenance. The infantry tank Mk4 Churchill, supplied to the USSR from 1942, it offered thick armor and excellent climbing ability, ideal for rough terrain and defensive battles. Early guns were modest, but later variants improved firepower. Soviet crews used Churchills in breakthrough roles. though they remained a minority compared to native tanks. The A-15 Crusader Mk3. A small number reached the USSR around 1943, bringing the improved 6-pounder anti-tank gun and better protection than earlier Crusaders. Designed as a fast cruiser tank, it was less suited to Soviet mud and winter. It saw limited frontline use before disappearing from Red Army records. The M3 Stuart. Delivered via Lend-Lease starting in 1941-42, this fast American light tank was valued for radios, optics, and reliability. Its 37mm gun was adequate early, but quickly outclassed by heavier German armor. Stuart served mainly in reconnaissance and cavalry units, with thousands shipped to the USSR. The M3 Lee. Sent to the USSR under Lend-Lease from 1942, it brought a 75mm gun, but in a tall, awkward hull with sponson-mounted firepower. Soviet crews often used it for training and secondary sectors, yet it helped fill the armored gap before domestic production surged. The M4A2 Sherman. This diesel Sherman was the main U.S. tank delivered to the Red Army, arriving from 1943 and valued for reliability and radios. It fought from Ukraine to Germany in Guards units and mechanized corps. Soviet crews nicknamed it MKs to corps. Soviet crews nicknamed it MK and praised its crew comfort. The M4A2 76W Sherman. Appearing in Soviet service late in 1944, it upgraded the Sherman with a 76mm gun and wet ammunition stowage to reduce fires. It gave Red Army units better anti-armor reach against Panthers and late Panzer RVs. It served through the final offensives into Berlin. The Panzerkampfwagen II. Designed as a stopgap, this light tank carried a 20mm autocannon and spearheaded early war German formations. The Red Army captured examples from 1941 onward, using them mainly for reconnaissance, security, or training. Thin armor and limited firepower made it obsolete on the Eastern Front. The Panzerkampfwagen 38. Originally Czech-built, it earned a reputation for mechanical reliability and a 37mm gun in 1941. Soviet forces captured numbers during the first year of Barbarossa and pressed some into service when tanks were scarce. Its small size helped scouting, but it struggled against T-34 armor. The Panzerkampfwagen III. Germany's early main battle tank. It evolved from 37mm to 50mm guns and fought hard in 1941-42. The Red Army captured Panzer's in working condition and occasionally used them as stopgaps or command vehicles. By 1943, it was largely outclassed by newer Soviet designs, the Panzerkampfwagen IV. Upgunned with a long-barreled 75mm in 1942, it became Germany's most important workhorse tank. Soviet troops captured serviceable Panzer IVs and sometimes redeployed them for local counterattacks or training. Its balanced design made it a prized trophy until spare parts and ammo ran out. The Panzerkampfwagen the Panther. Introduced at Kursk in 1943, it combined strong sloped armor with a high-velocity 75mm gun that threatened any Soviet tank at range. The Red Army captured Panthers for testing and occasional battlefield use. Powerful but complex breakdowns and logistics often decided its fate. The Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger I, debuting in 1942, its 88mm gun and heavy armor made it a terror in defensive battles. Soviet units captured a handful intact, studying them closely and sometimes using them briefly under Soviet markings. For the Red Army, the Tiger was both a battlefield threat and an intelligence prize. The Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger II Königstiger. Entering combat in 1944, it fielded massive frontal armor and the long 88mm Kakuta 43 deadly at distance. The Soviets captured a few for trials, but the tank's weight and mechanical strain limited real-world usefulness. Even as a trophy, it demanded a whole support system.